Tim?
You have the financial reports in your packet through April 30th. We're through 10 months of the year. The revenue for the month is $572,000. Again, over a third of that came from real estate taxes that we're still receiving, that were due in March. We also received a third payment on the reimbursements for special education and transportation. Last year, just to note that we only received two of the payments that we were supposed to receive in fiscal 2012. So far in 13, we've received three of the payments. And I think the fourth payment will actually come in July, but we've received three of those payments. The total operating fund revenue for the first 10 months, $20,502,000, 103% of budget. So we're already over budget in terms of our revenue for the year for the operating funds. Our expenditures for the month, $1,816,000. Again, as usual, 2/3 of that is salary and benefits. The other significant item that we paid out in the month of April was the quarterly payment that we make to Airmark. Now instead of paying them monthly, we pay them quarterly, so that was $284,000. And the year-to-date operating expenditures were $15,900,000, 79% of budget. That percentage is going to increase fairly substantially in May, simply because in May, we run the payrolls for not only May, but also for June and July. So that number will jump up fairly significantly. And at the end of April, we had $10,600,000 in our operating fund, A couple of questions that came up with regard to the financials. There was a question regarding the allocation of the tax money and why the percentages vary from one fund to another. I think
Page?
Pardon?
Page you're referencing?
What page?
This was on page 9, and it also includes the tax dollars on page 14, page 15, page 16. The percentages vary. In the education fund, we've collected over 102% of the money that we budgeted in tax dollars. In some of the other funds, in operations, for example, I think we've collected about 90-some%. So the question was why are the allocations different? Why are the percentages different? I think last year when we did the budget, and again this year what I've prepared is a calculation of how the money should be coming in based on the tax levies over the past couple of years. I'm really going to have to get with the Township Treasurer's Office to see how they do the allocation, because the tax dollars go to the Treasurer's Office. They then allocate it to all the different funds. So I would have to check with them, and I can do that.
The reason I asked again is, we do allocate, we ask them for the levy for the district, and then they take it and allocate it across all the taxpayers based on their value. And we, no matter what any of our properties are in the school district, all the board members, we get the same percentage on our bill based on whatever our property value is. And we either pay the bill or we don't pay the bill generally, I assume. I just can't understand why, I don't decide I'm gonna pay, I'll pay my whole education levy, but I'm only gonna pay 80% of my O&M levy. That's why I don't understand.
And when the county sends the money to the township treasurer, they just send them a lump sum.
Oh.
They say, here's $1 million. The township treasurer has to take that and allocate it to each of our funds. So I
Okay.
really have to review with him, how are you allocating that?
Okay.
And I'll do that and have an answer for you on that. There was also a request that when we present the budget, that there be an explanation of all the different fields that there are in the different account numbers, and I'll have that for you.
Thank you.
And I think the final question on the financials had to do with one of the accounts in the IMRF fund that continues to go over budget. And there's two different groupings for the business office in the financials. One is called business office, the other is called fiscal services. Generally, the business office includes the business manager, who in the past has been a TRS employee. When I came in, I'm an IMRF employee. So there isn't an account in the business office per se to cover IMRF expenses. I don't know if this is making sense, but so it has to be taken out of a different account where it wasn't budgeted. And that's the reason for it.
Is that something we can correct next year when we do the
Yes.
new budget?
Yes.
You make note of that?
Yes. A couple other things I just wanted to mention. An update on the transportation bid. Our bid for transportation for the bus company that we use for the next 3 years for all of the athletic transportation as well as the field trips, we went out to bid for next year and through 2016. We advertised that. The bid documents went out to 5 different busing companies. They're due back in Thursday. The bid opening is 10 o'clock, and we'll have a recommendation for you at the June board meeting that we can discuss.
And how long are we asking for the
3 years.
3 years? Okay.
Okay, Tim, we had a problem last year where the buses, drivers weren't showing up. How was it this year, this past year?
Last year, they didn't have enough bus drivers.
Right.
Okay, and so what we did was we contacted them on a weekly basis and said, are you gonna have enough drivers to cover us for next week? In many cases, they didn't. For a period of probably 6 weeks, they didn't. So the athletic department would go out and reschedule those trips with a different company. Illinois Central had to pay the difference, and we billed them the difference between the contract price they had signed and the amount that we were paying Grand Prairie, and they paid that to us.
Yeah.
After I think about 6 weeks, they said that they had enough drivers, and so we stopped using Grand Prairie. Now, we have had some issues this year. Art's kept me informed of that. There have been some issues, I think, on Saturdays where a bus didn't show up.
Yeah, we've had issues lately. Probably this last month has been the most issues. And it was the same thing. They would call us really the day of and say, we don't have enough drivers, so we don't have enough buses. So we would be scrambling. Or we could go with them, but we'd get a bus at 4 o'clock instead of 3:15. So, I mean, there was probably 10, 15 times this year and a lot in the last month.
So could I make a suggestion that you put a penalty clause in that's more painful for our district than it is for another district? So when they choose, when they have when they have 2 routes and 1 driver, they're gonna come to you as opposed to another district, but you may wanna do that.
Okay.
So what happened in those time periods when the buses didn't show?
You're talking about last year? When they-
No, this year.
This year?
We doubled up, or we had them drop the team off that was kind of local, either at Ellard or North Riverside, and come back and pick up that second team, so they would just get there late. You know, not a ridiculous amount late, but late.
So I do agree with Gary, there should be a penalty
Yeah.
clause in
Well, last year, we knew ahead of time. This year, the cases Art's talking about, we haven't found out ahead of time. Found out the day of the event, and obviously.
When we found out
You
ahead
can't
of
turn around
time-
and get another bus company at that
When we
point.
found out ahead of time last year, there was a clause in there that we would have to pay their rate and then we could outsource it and they would have to make up the difference.
Right, but-
They did accommodate that, but
But you want maybe the district that they actually sent their bus to has a more painful penalty. So you should look to,
Okay.
Okay.
And then one other thing, there was a question regarding bookstore inventory that came up. Most of the books that we have in the bookstore, even if we don't sell them in a particular year, we do use them year after year. So if we haven't used them this year, we probably will use them next year. Now, what we did at the end of the year here was we contacted all the department chairs about some of the books that remained in the bookstore, asked them if they were gonna use those. We've had Follett come in, and they're gonna give us pricing on buying them back from us. So we'll have to see what they'll come up with.
All right, any other questions for Tim?
thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.